I need to check the names to avoid, then write the story. The forbidden names are Raymond, Renata, Sophie, Marcus, Frank Calloway, Daniel, Carla, Patricia, Gerald McDonald, Aaron, Melissa, Joanne, Howard, Nora, Brett, Walt, Edmund, Clifton, Tara, Dolores, Walter, Kevin, Diane, Lily, Owen Stafford, Preston, Vivian, Theodore, Len, Elaine, Conrad, Stuart, Arthur Delaney, Nathan, Sabrina, Carol, Harlan, Renee, Garrett, Beverly, Martin, Iris, Greg, Cody, Russell, Wendy, Dexter, Cooper, Miles Chadwick, Lee, Donovan, Sylvia, Hazel, Brent, George, Todd, Pamela, Emma, Elliot, Vivian, Felix, Lawrence, Patrick, Augustin, June. I'll use Roger, narrator, 64, Dylan, son-in-law, Adele, daughter, Mia, granddaughter. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone the full version of. Not my neighbors. Not my buddy from the Navy. Not even my pastor. But I've been sitting on this for long enough, and I think it's time. My name is Roger. I'm 64 years old. Retired after 31 years working for a regional power company. Lineman. Then supervisor. Then safety coordinator. I own a house. A real house. Not a condo. Not a townhome. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on Birchwood Lane in Clarksville, Tennessee, that I paid off in full 11 years ago. My late wife, Irene, and I scraped for every dollar of that mortgage. We painted every room ourselves. We put in the back porch with our own hands, board by board, one summer when our daughter Adele was 9 years old, and kept handing us nails like she was assisting in surgery. Irene passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer. 16 months from diagnosis to the end. I won't spend too long on that part because I still can't get through it now my chest's locking up. What I'll say is this. After she was gone, that house got very quiet. And I let it stay quiet. I needed it quiet. Then my daughter called. Adele is 33. She's smart. She's funny. She has her mother's laugh. And unfortunately, her mother's stubbornness too. She called me on a Tuesday night in February. I remember because I was watching a basketball game I didn't care about. And she said, Dad, Dylan and I are in a really bad spot. We might lose the apartment. Dylan is her husband. Dylan Marsh. He's 36. He sold flooring products for a mid-sized distribution company. Commission-based. And apparently the previous 6 months had been, in his words, a rough patch. I'd heard about the rough patch. I'd been hearing about the rough patch since Thanksgiving. Adele asked if they could stay with me. Just for a few months, she said. Just until Dylan got back on his feet and they could save a deposit on a new place. They had their daughter Mia with them. My granddaughter, 7 years old, missing her 2 front teeth and obsessed with frogs. For Mia alone, I would have said yes to almost anything. Of course, I said. Come home. I told them they could have the 2 bigger bedrooms. I'd keep mine and the little office at the end of the hall. I didn't ask for rent. I didn't ask for a timeline. I stocked the refrigerator the weekend before they arrived, bought new sheets for the guest room, put a little frog figurine on Mia's nightstand because I'd seen one at a gift shop and thought she'd love it. She did love it. She named it Gerald. The first 2 weeks were fine. Better than fine, actually. Having noise in the house again felt strange, and then it felt good. Mia would climb into the armchair beside me in the mornings, and we'd watch cartoons and eat cereal, and she'd explain to me very seriously which cartoon characters were trustworthy and which ones were not. I'll take those mornings to my grave. Dylan was polite those first weeks. Maybe, but polite. Said thank you at dinner. Helped carry in groceries once. I didn't expect him to be my best friend. I just expected basic decency. That seemed like a reasonable bar. The changes started small, the way they usually do. Week 3, I came downstairs and found that the armchair, the big tan armchair that Irene picked out, that I'd been sitting in for 12 years, had been moved to the corner of the room, angled toward the wall, and the new arrangement had put the couch dead center in front of the TV. When I asked Adele about it, she said, "Oh, it just worked better for the 3 of us. You don't mind, do you, Dad?" I moved the chair back that afternoon. Nobody said anything. Week 5, Dylan started having work calls in the kitchen. Long ones, sometimes 2 hours. Loud, lots of laughing. Fine. I started eating breakfast earlier to avoid the overlap. I adapted. I'm good at adapting. 31 years working utility infrastructure, you learn to adapt. Week 7. I found a padlock on the door of my garage workshop. My workshop. Where I keep my tools, my project bench, my fishing gear. The lock wasn't mine. When I asked Dylan about it, he said, "Oh, I've been storing some inventory samples in there for a client presentation. Didn't want Mia getting in and touching anything." He said he'd give me a key. He never gave me a key. I should have said something hard right then. I know that now. I should have handed him a bag and said, "First sign." But I thought about Adele. I thought about Mia and her frog. I let it go. By month 3, the house didn't feel like my house anymore. Dylan had started referring to the living room as our space. He'd bought a new coffee machine without asking and put it where I kept my bread box, which he'd moved to a cabinet without telling me. He'd rearranged the spice rack. He'd thrown out a set of mixing bowls that had been Irene's because they were taking up too much room. I found them in a bag at the top of the trash. I brought them back inside and put them in the top of my closet and didn't say a word. Adele tried sometimes. I could see her trying. She'd catch his tone and give him a look. Or she'd come find me afterward and say, "He's under a lot of stress, Dad." I understood stress. I also understood that stress doesn't give you the right to throw away a dead woman's mixing bowls. The breaking point came on a Sunday in October. Mia's birthday was the week before, and I'd made her a cake from scratch. Yellow cake with chocolate frosting. The same one Irene used to make for Adele every year. Mia had been over the moon about it. I'd also invited my neighbor Phyllis and her husband over, and my old colleague Bernard from the power company. Nothing big. 6 people, a little girl's birthday, a backyard afternoon. Dylan hadn't liked that. He'd been cold the whole afternoon, barely spoken. Disappeared inside early. After everyone left, he told Adele, loudly enough that I could hear from the hallway, that he didn't appreciate people just showing up to their home without enough notice. Their home. I stood in the hallway for a moment and let that land. Then I went to bed. 2 weeks later was the Sunday I'll never forget for the rest of my life. I'd spent Saturday making a pot roast. Full Sunday dinner, pot roast, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes, homemade rolls. Irene's recipe, the one with a little bit of honey. I was planning it as a peace offering of sorts, a reset. I'd woken up that morning and decided that I was going to try harder to make things comfortable for everyone. I was going to suggest we sit down as a family and set some ground rules, calmly, over a good meal. I set the table myself. I put out the good plates, the ones Irene and I got as a wedding gift, cream-colored with a thin blue band around the rim. I folded the napkins. I put a small centerpiece together from some flowers Phyllis had given me from her garden. Dylan came downstairs, around noon, and stopped in the doorway of the dining room. He looked at the table. Then he looked at me. "We're having people over today," he said. I looked up. "What?" "My brother Nate and his wife are coming for dinner." I told them 1 o'clock. I hadn't been told. Not a word. Not a text. Not a mention. Nothing. "Dylan," I said carefully, "I made dinner for us. There's enough for 6, maybe, but there's plenty of food," he said. "It'll be fine." He said it like I'd raised a concern about parking. I stood there for a second and then I said, "I would have appreciated a heads up." He looked at me the way someone looks at a child who said something mildly inconvenient. "Roger," he said. Not Dad. Not even the vague politeness of Sir. Just Roger. Flat. Like a period. "You need to relax. It's not a big deal." I went back to the kitchen. Nate and his wife arrived at 1:15. They were pleasant enough. We all sat down. I served the food. I sat at the end of the table. The head of the table. The chair I've sat in at every meal in this house for 20 years. Halfway through the meal, Dylan's brother made a comment about the mashed potatoes. Complimentary. Said they were excellent. Dylan said, Yeah, Roger's a decent cook, like a foreman reviewing the work of someone on his crew. After dinner, Dylan's brother mentioned he'd love to see the backyard, so Dylan took him out. The wives went to the living room. I started clearing plates, and then Dylan came back in through the sliding door, alone, and said something that I still can't fully explain, because there was no logic to it, no provocation, no lead-up. He said, "Hey, do me a favor and take your coffee to your room tonight. We're going to watch a movie out here." I set down the plate I was holding, very carefully. "I'm sorry," I said. "We're going to have a little adult time. Mia's already up in her room. You don't mind, right?" I looked at him for a long moment. The sliding door to my back porch, the back porch I built with my own hands. The living room with my wife's furniture. The house where I raised my daughter. The house that has my name on the deed, on the property tax, on every utility bill. "I don't mind at all," I said. I put down the dish towel. I walked upstairs. I went to my room, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I looked at the photograph of Irene on my nightstand. The one from the summer before she got sick. The two of us at the lake, both of us laughing at something I can't remember anymore. I said, out loud, to her photograph, "What would you do?" I already knew the answer. I didn't sleep much that night. But I was very calm. That's the thing people don't understand about getting older. You learn the difference between being angry and being resolved. I wasn't angry. I was resolved. Monday morning, I made 2 phone calls before Dylan came downstairs. The first was to my attorney, a man named Philip who I've used for 30 years, a quiet and precise man who once told me that the clearest legal document in the world is a recorded deed with one name on it. I explained the situation. He walked me through the formal process for establishing that Adele and Dylan were occupants, not tenants, and what the notice requirements were for my state. He emailed me a form by the time I finished my second cup of coffee. The second call was to my daughter. That was the harder one. I told Adele I loved her. I meant it completely. I told her that nothing about what I was going to do was about her or Mia. I told her that I wanted her in my life, that I expected to have Sunday dinners with her and watch Mia grow up, that I would help her however I could to find a stable place. I told her that I needed her to understand what was happening inside my own home, and that it needed to stop. Adele was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, he's been going through a hard time." "I know," I said. "And I have been patient and generous and silent, but last night your husband dismissed me from my own living room, in my own house, and I won't accept that." Another silence. Then, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to ask him to leave. I would like you to stay or come back once you've sorted something. But I cannot have him here." She started crying. Not arguing, just crying. And I held the phone and waited, because there's no shortcut through that moment. I told her I was sorry she was in the middle of it. I meant that too. I gave Dylan a formal written notice that afternoon. 30 days. I slid it under the door of the bedroom he and Adele were using, in an envelope, with my attorney's contact information on it. Philip had advised me to do it in writing and keep a copy. I kept a copy. Dylan knocked on my office door 20 minutes later. He came in without waiting for me to say, "Come in." He was holding the envelope. His face had the look of a man who had never once, in 36 years, been told no by someone he'd already decided had no authority. "What is this?" he said. "It's a notice to vacate," I said. 30 days. He stared at me. "You can't do this." "I own the house," I said. "Philip's number is on the letter, if you'd like to discuss the legal specifics." "Adele is your daughter." "Yes," I said. "She is, and she is welcome to stay. The notice applies to you." He went very still. Then he said, with a kind of cold smile, "You're going to regret this." I looked at him steadily. "Dylan," I said, "I've buried my wife. I've had harder mornings than this. Close the door on your way out." He left. He did close the door. The next 30 days were tense in the way that a house gets when 2 people are waiting for something. Adele and Dylan had several arguments I wasn't meant to hear. She came to my office one evening and sat down across from me, and we talked for 2 hours. About her, about the marriage, about things I hadn't known and things I had suspected. I didn't tell her what to do. I just listened. I poured us both a glass of sweet tea, and I listened. She said, near the end, "He's not going to change, is he?" I said, "That's not for me to answer." She nodded like she'd already known. On day 28, Dylan moved out. He loaded a rented truck with what he considered his belongings, including, I noticed, the coffee machine, which he had purchased. So that was fair. And he drove away on a gray Tuesday morning without saying anything to me directly. He and Adele were separated before the month was out. The night after he left, Adele and I sat on the back porch together. It was cool, but not cold. Mia was asleep inside. We sat with our mugs and didn't say a lot. The yard was dark and quiet, and the motion light from Phyllis's house kept clicking on and off when her cat walked by. "I'm sorry, Dad," Adele said eventually. "You don't need to be," I said. "I should have seen it sooner." "We see things when we're ready," I said. That's all I said. She stayed another 6 weeks while she found an apartment. Good weeks. Mia and I resumed our cartoon mornings. I taught her how to play a basic version of checkers. She beat me 3 times, fair and square, and was extremely proud about it. The morning Adele loaded the last of her boxes into her car. She hugged me for a long time on the front porch. Mia was already in the car seat, holding Gerald the frog. Adele pulled back and looked at me and said, "How did you do it so calmly?" I thought about Irene's photograph. I thought about sitting on the edge of the bed that Sunday night. "I've been a homeowner for a long time," I said. "You learn that the deed is the thing that doesn't argue." She laughed. It was her mother's laugh. The house is quiet again now. But it's a different kind of quiet, not the hollow kind I had right after Irene. This is the quiet of a place that knows it belongs to someone again. On Friday evenings, Adele and Mia come for dinner. Mia has graduated from checkers and is now learning rummy, which she considers a very grown-up game and approaches with tremendous seriousness. Last week she brought Gerald to dinner and set him on the table next to her plate. "Frogs like pot roast?" I asked her. She considered this very seriously. "Gerald likes everything you cook, Grandpa," she said. "He told me, I don't know what lesson you're supposed to take from a story like this. People always want a clean moral at the end. The only thing I can tell you is what I told Adele. On that porch, we see things when we're ready. And when you finally see them clearly, you don't have to shout. You just have to be the one whose name is on the door. That's enough. That's always been enough." If this story felt familiar to you, if you sat in a room in your own house and felt like a stranger in it, I want you to know that feeling has a remedy. It starts with remembering that kindness is not the same as surrender. Thank you for spending this time with me. If you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe and stay with us. There are more coming. There always are. I've thought a lot about what made Dylan the way he was. Not out of sympathy, I moved past that, but out of genuine curiosity, the way you think about a storm after it's gone. How does a man move into another person's home, eat that person's food, sleep under that person's roof, and still find a way to feel like the one in charge? I don't think it was stupidity. I think it was something quieter and more dangerous than that. It was the assumption that kindness has no limit, that a person who keeps giving will never stop, that patience in a generous man looks like weakness. Dylan read me wrong from the start. He saw a widower who was lonely, a father who wanted his daughter close, a retired man with a big, quiet house and no one to fill it. He saw all of that, and he thought, soft. He thought, manageable. He thought, I can work with this. What he didn't account for was that I had spent 31 years making sure that power lines didn't kill people. That kind of work teaches you something about load bearing. Everything has a limit. Everything has a point past which it fails. And the job of a careful person is to know exactly where that point is and to act before you reach it, not after. I wasn't passive all those months. I was watching. I was measuring. I was deciding what kind of man I still wanted to be at 64, in the house I'd paid off, in the life I'd rebuilt after losing Irene. And what I decided was this. I was not going to let grief make me small. I was not going to let loneliness turn into a door that anyone could walk through and rearrange the furniture. The night Dylan told me to take my coffee to my room, something settled in me. Not anger. Clarity. There's a difference, and it matters. Anger makes you loud and imprecise. Clarity makes you quiet and exact. I knew what I was going to do before I turned off the light that night, and I knew I was going to do it calmly, legally, and without a single raised voice. That's the thing about integrity. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up in the morning and makes the phone call and slides the envelope under the door. It doesn't need an audience. People ask me sometimes if I regret not acting sooner. I used to think yes. Now I think the timing was what it was. Adele needed to see it herself, on her own schedule, in her own way. If I'd pushed Dylan out in month 1, she might have followed him out of loyalty and spent years believing I was the one who broke her family. Instead, she sat on my porch on a cool October night and said, "He's not going to change, is he?" She'd arrived at that herself. That matters. You can't hand someone a conclusion they haven't earned. It doesn't stick. What I hope anyone takes from this is simple. Being good to people, genuinely, generously good, is not the same as giving up your right to be treated well in return. Those two things are not in conflict. You can be warm and be firm. You can love someone and still hold a line. And when a line needs holding, the most powerful thing you can do is hold it quietly, with documentation, and your attorney's number already dialed. The deed was always in my name. I just needed to remember that it was enough.